Hello, my front-end friend, and welcome to my podcast, Journal Musings. My name is Kevin, and in this podcast, I talk about whatever is front of mind for me in any given week, usually in some way that's related to front-end development, though we're doing a little bit of a tangent this week, partially because I want to talk about why I didn't put out an episode last week, which you may have noticed, or you might not have, which is fine. If that's the case, I'm here to tell you I did miss last week. And it's not that I had not recorded it last week, it's just that I'd never posted it. And actually, I'd recorded it 3 separate times. This is my 4th recording for sort of what I'm talking about this week, which is, anyway, you'll see how it all comes together, I guess. But those other recordings, there was nothing actually wrong with them. Like, sometimes I make a YouTube video, and I only realize at the end that my audio is muted or something stupid like that. I've done that way more times than I'd like to admit, and I have a few things now in place that I hopefully will prevent that from happening again. I won't talk about all the problems I run into, but you'd think after doing this for 8 or 9 years now, it would not be something that happens, but it still does from time to time. No, this time I had actually recorded all 3 of them. They were just all at various levels of not very good, to the point where I didn't want to post them. And for a podcast where I tend to just ramble a lot, that's a pretty low bar for me not to actually post something. But part of the reason I felt that they weren't very good was because they weren't genuine or honest. I guess genuine would be a better word than honest. And to make sense of that a little bit, I think, and why that meant I didn't want to post them, one of the things that makes me really happy when I meet people in person, when I'm doing conferences or other things, or I just randomly meet people in the street sometimes, which is always pretty cool. But it's when they tell me that I'm basically exactly how they expected me to be based on the impression they have me from my videos. And that makes me really happy, because one of the most important things in all of the public facing work that I do is to try and be as genuine as possible. I don't want to be putting on a persona or something like that when I'm on screen. My kids do tell me I'm a bit happier or excited, especially during the introductions of my video. So, my oldest son is often like, "Why do you get so excited at the start? That's not where you're like." And I'm like, well, I do, a lot of the things I talk about do excite me, but that, I guess, is the one thing where there might be a little bit of a difference. But I think in general, what you see is what you get. And so that's why I put last week's episodes in the bin, because what I was talking about in those wasn't actually what was going on. And the main reason for that is I was in a bit of a funk for like 2 weeks now. And I was trying to use the podcast as a way to project being out of that funk. And so the things I was talking about in it weren't what was actually going on. It was what I was wishing was actually going on. And in the last one I did, I was talking about the steps I had taken to get out and be productive again, and that wasn't actually what was happening. But those ones had varying degrees of me saying, this is the tricks and tips and other things that I used to get out of it, especially the third one. Because I think at that point I was kind of exasperated with the whole situation, and I was really hoping by saying all of that it would manifest itself into reality, which is really not what happened. And the things that I was talking about were things that I do often use that do help, and they didn't work there. And part of that was by recording them, I'm getting the ball rolling, and that means things, you find the small things you can do to just help things start progressing in the right direction, such as recording an episode. And that often for me is a really good way to actually get other things done after that, because I've gotten one thing done that just sort of snowballs from there. This time that definitely did not work. If anything, the more time went on, the less work I was getting done over the last 2 weeks. And yeah, now I am out of it, and I'm not here to tell you how I did it, because first of all, I don't actually know what I did. I just eventually had to do something, and then stuff started happening. But I also have realized that a lot of the things I was talking about were not useful to anybody. And it was me lying to myself in a way about this is what I did to pull myself up and get myself out of the situation, which is not true. It didn't work. It didn't get me out of that situation. I was still stuck in the rut for quite a while. And that was one of the reasons I didn't post the last one, because the last one was mostly, these are the different things I've done. And I did talk about things that have genuinely helped me in the past, but they hadn't helped me this time. So I didn't want to talk about them. I didn't want to post something after sitting there for a while and being like, oh, this didn't actually work. So that's one of the reasons I didn't do it. And then I'm like, this is also an area that I'm not an expert on, right? Like I can sit down and talk about CSS and front end development and other things. I shouldn't be sitting down and talking about mental health in any way, shape, or form. I don't think it's like, I think we can talk about like normalizing certain things that, like, you know, in terms of like, I was feeling unproductive, which I think made me feel more unproductive than I actually was being. Because if I looked at what I was doing, I wasn't hitting like this like standard that I had for myself, which demotivated me a little bit, which then made me do less. And it was a little bit of a cyclical thing there. So I think like talking about how those types of things can impact an individual, I think is fine. And just normalizing like, oh, sometimes people don't feel great is fine too. And sometimes not being productive is fine. And I think especially in like the culture we live in now with like social media and productivity culture and other things, sometimes we feel we put a pressure on ourselves because of like this perceived productivity that other people have. And I know some people often ask me like, how are you so productive, Kevin? And I'm like, oh, I'm not that productive. And it can seem that way because everything I do is public facing, or at least almost everything I do is public facing. So it puts out this like false, it's not false, you see the work I'm doing, but like if you made every single thing that you worked on public facing, other people would think you're insanely productive as well, right? So and it's not to say that the work I do doesn't take a decent amount of work to actually get done, but it's definitely not this like super high level of productivity that I need to maintain on a regular basis. I think I'm doing a pretty regular amount of work within a pretty regular amount of time during the week. I don't do 80-hour weeks anymore. I don't, I haven't done like a crazy amount of work in a while. And even when I try and work at night now, I can't. Like I'm just tired. I'm 40 now or more, over 40 now. And those old days of evening sessions, I can write some things like articles or stuff like that, or lessons. I can do writing at night, but like anything that's like planning, I don't know, like it's weird, eh? For writing, I'm okay with. I just thought of that because I do some writing at night, not very often, but if I'm doing courses or other things where I need to like get a little bit of extra work done, I have done that in the past. But like I can write something to explain things. I'm not about to like code a demo up at night or record something at night like I used to do when this was my side hustle and all that. But I'm sort of rambling as is normal with this podcast right now. I should change this from general musings to like random ramblings or something. But it's just all to say like the outward things that we see sometimes give us false impressions. And there's the whole productivity culture thing now that's, I think, can be quite bad for mental health. And all that to say that, talking about like, these are the things that I've used to pick myself up, I don't think are the most useful, just because what potentially can happen is somebody who is not feeling fantastic at the time might listen to that, try them, and it doesn't work. And then it just continues that cycle of negativity that they might be feeling. And mental health is a tricky subject. And I don't want to give suggestions on how people can improve on that front, because through the 2 weeks I just went through, definitely am not an expert on being, knowing anything about this other than don't be too hard on yourself if you can. But that's like the worst advice you could possibly give, right? To somebody who's not feeling great. Just I guess the main advice I can give is if you have been in a prolonged period of not feeling fantastic, that talking to other people can definitely help. Maybe that was the one thing that did help me a lot, was talking to my wife about how I was, and that took me a while to get around to even doing it, even though we're super close and share everything. And whether it's not somebody who's really close to you, a professional, anything like that. Because I don't want to be giving advice on really important topics that I'm definitely not an expert on, other than giving that, talk to people, whether it's a professional or just people that are close to you or whatever it is, which can be really, really, really hard to do. But I think that's probably the only thing that is safe advice that I can give, that I feel comfortable giving on a public platform like this. But and I think the other thing is what I just mentioned about like the false, not the fault, but it's like anything we see on social media when we see how productive other people are, whether it's just like this impression we get of people, or the people that are actually like productivity people that are just showing all these things they do to help maintain their insane productivity. Like, it's all edited and done. And like, it's the same when I do a video and people are like, oh, that's what a professional coder looks like. And it's like, no, that's what a somebody who sat down and put together a demo ahead of time and researched things and knows this, even though they know the subject really well, they still spend time putting all of this work beforehand so I could record something that comes across as relatively competent. Right? So like, and I've talked about this before, so I'm not going to deep dive it, but like there's been a lot of people that have watched one of my live streams and then been like, oh, you look things up while you're doing work. I didn't realize that. And then I think people get, if they have primarily learned through watching video, have false impressions of what it actually means to code. And that happens with everything. So like, it's the same thing. If you're watching these productivity, I mean, I've seen some productivity people on YouTube, and I've watched stuff just because like for me, like getting good workflows in helps for me. But like I've seen some people that are there that have like they'll have like this productivity workflow, and then a week later is a different productivity workflow, and then a week later is another productivity workflow, or like a new Notion thing. And then like, there's always like this new. And it's like, well, if any of these systems were what they were using on a regular basis, that would be their one system that they use. Because if it really is working for them, they're not about to continually change their thing. They're just finding different productivity systems that are out there and talking about them and showing people how they work. And I'd be very curious about, you know, to me, the one that matters is the one that these people actually use, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't use anything fancy. And so they often have to talk about, and this isn't all of them. There are people that are a lot more consistent and just talk more about things that work for them. But I think just with how all of this works, and of course this is the same for anything, right? I'm talking about productivity and coding because those are sort of topics I'm interested in, to varying degrees. With the productivity one, I just like finding simple things that work for me. That's, I guess, productivity tip for me is find simple systems that work for you. The simpler it is, the better, because as soon as it gets more complicated, you end up just spending time configuring the system and not and optimizing the system, and not actually optimizing the work that the system is meant for you to be optimizing. So like, simpler the better, and tweak it over time. And it can get more complex as time goes on because it sort of builds on itself. That's sort of like where I'm at now, and I'm pretty happy with the things I have in place, but they're also very niche for the type of work I do and the way I like to work. And I think that's the important thing, is a simple system can take that approach. And then it can also, when you get into your funks or your times where you're not being very productive, because it's simple, it's easy to get back to the core of it when you need to get that reboot going. Because having to get a whole bunch of videos done, like I had recently, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, I recorded like 4 videos in one afternoon, and that was just because I sort of got back into the swing of things, going to a very simple approach, which helped me just, okay, let's finally get this done now that I'm in more of a work mode, and my brain sort of escaped the negativity cycle that I had been on. It wasn't negativity, it was just procrastination / not wanting to do anything. And I do think that the deadline was the big push there. But I'm definitely on more of a ramble than I was planning on going on for this one. So I just want to give a little bit of a heads up that while we had a break last week, we're going to be having a longer break going forward, because I'm going to be putting this podcast into a little summer vacation. When I say little, it's a long summer vacation. It'll probably be 4 to 6 weeks long. I don't know exactly yet, because my summer plans are a little bit up in the air at the moment, especially after the next 2 weeks. So I don't know timing on everything. It might come back sooner than expected. There might be a random episode in the middle of that, or 2 or 3 or none. I don't know. If I have time to record something and I have something that's worth talking about, I'll try and do that. But otherwise, 4 to 6 week little vacation, long vacation, whatever we want to call that. And then we'll be back. I know sometimes breaks are the death knell for podcasts, but I've done longer breaks than that. And here we are. This podcast is still going. And I actually have some interviews planned for once I'm back that I'm very much looking forward to. So that will help sort of ensure that things actually get back off the ground. There'll probably be a few solo episodes first, and then we'll get back into having some podcasty stuff. And then we'll get into the interviews, or not interviews. They're interviews, but I think conversations is better. I want them to be conversations more than interviews. Though if you do have anyone that you'd like to see me interview or have a conversation with. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment down below. If you're listening to this in a podcast form, then just message me on Blue Sky or whatever to let me know who your suggestions are, because I'm always looking for more people to talk with, and I'm very much open for suggestions. And yeah, that's it for this week and the next however many weeks until we are back. Thank you very much for listening. And until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.